Welcome to Build Strong Habits podcast channel. This is an audio podcast, so take your eyes off the screen, sit back, relax, and listen.
Welcome back, everybody. Ready for another deep dive.
Absolutely, always ready to dive in.
Okay, so today we're tackling a show that really hit a nerve a few years back, 13 Reasons Why.
Yeah, this one definitely got people talking.
It sure did. I mean, the story of Hannah Baker and those tapes, each one addressed to a person she felt contributed to her, well, to her decision to end her life.
Heavy stuff.
It really is. And that's what we're here to unpack. We'll look at the show's big themes, dive into the characters, and hopefully figure out what it all means for us, beyond the screen.
Because even though it's fiction, there's a lot of real-world stuff in there.
Exactly. And one of the things that struck me is how the show makes us experience Hannah's story through the people who get those tapes.
Right, we're put in their shoes, forced to see the ripple effects of their actions.
Even the little things, the things they might not even think twice about.
It's like this web of interconnected lives.
Yeah, and it makes you realize that every word, every choice has an impact.
Sometimes in ways we don't even realize.
So let's start with Hannah herself. She's pretty complex, right?
Oh, for sure. Bright, creative, got this spark to her.
But underneath it all,
There's this feeling of being invisible.
and that's something a lot of people can relate to, especially teenagers.
Absolutely, those years can be so tough. You're trying to figure out who you are, where you fit in.
And the show is really good at showing how all the little hurts and betrayals build up for Hannah.
It's gradual, but you see it chipping away at her self-worth, and there's this silence around her, like nobody's really seeing her pain.
Have you ever felt invisible?
I think we all have at some point.
It's that feeling like no one's truly seeing you, hearing you.
Like you're blending into the background.
Exactly. And 13 Reasons Why makes the point that even seemingly small actions, like ignoring someone or spreading a rumor, can make someone feel that way,
Like a snowball rolling downhill.
picking up more and more snow.
Until it becomes this unstoppable force.
And that's the thing. It's not just the big dramatic moments that hurt Hannah.
Right, it's the everyday stuff, too.
The missed connections.
The lack of kindness.
Like, you think about the scene with Bryce Walker. It's obviously horrible, but it's what happens after that's also disturbing.
The silence.
People knowing and not doing anything. That's heavy stuff.
It's like that silence becomes a form of agreement.
Like it's allowing that behavior to keep
It
happening.
makes you wonder, what would you do in that situation?
Would you speak up?
Would you break the silence?
That's a tough question.
It is, and it's something that the show makes us think about on a personal level. Like, we all have a responsibility to look out for each other,
To stand up for what's right.
to speak out against injustice, even when it's hard.
And it all comes back to communication. Those tapes, they're Hannah's final attempt to be heard.
After being silenced for so long.
And it's heartbreaking because it shows how damaging it can be to bottle things up, all those missed opportunities for connection.
And then there's Clay. He's just wrecked with guilt,
Reliving every interaction with Hannah.
wondering if he could have done something, seen the pain she was hiding.
And that feeling, I think we've all had that at some point. That what if I'd reached out? What if I'd really listened?
It shows how important it is to be present in our relationships.
To truly listen to what people are saying, even when they're not saying it out loud.
Yeah, sometimes it's not about having the answer.
It's about being there.
Letting someone know they're not alone.
Do you ever think about how you listen? I mean, really listen.
All the time.
Are we really taking in what someone's saying or just waiting for our turn to talk?
That's the question, isn't it? Because truly listening, that takes empathy.
Putting aside your own thoughts and judgments.
Trying to see things from their perspective,
And that's how you create a space where someone can be vulnerable.
where they feel safe enough to share their fears and their pain without judgment.
And sometimes that's the most powerful thing you can do. Just listen. It's interesting, right? How all the other characters react to Hannah's tapes.
Oh, absolutely. It shows how her suicide really impacted everyone around her.
Like those tapes are these shockwaves going out.
Forcing them to face their own issues, their guilt, their responsibility.
And each character, it's like they represent a different way of dealing with all
Kicks
that.
and facets of grief, yes.
Like Clay, he's carrying so much guilt,
that what if feeling. What if I had been a better friend?
and it's eating him alive.
It's interesting, though. He kind of becomes the stand-in for us, the audience.
How so?
Well, he's the one listening to the tapes,
Yeah.
right? Trying to figure out what happened to Hannah,
Oh, wait.
putting the pieces together.
But at the same time,
He's having to look at his own actions, too. His own role in all of this.
Holding up a mirror, basically.
Yeah, and I think that's a powerful message for all of us. It's easy to blame others, but real growth comes from taking responsibility for our own actions.
Admitting that we've messed up, hurt people, even if we didn't mean to.
Exactly.
And then you have someone like Bryce.
Mm.
He's almost the opposite of Clay. He's got this,
Dark side.
yeah, toxic masculinity, that sense of entitlement.
And the show doesn't shy away from the damage he causes.
Not at all. I mean, what he does to Hannah, it's horrific. But even beyond that, it's like he represents this whole culture
That looks the other way.
with sexual assault, yeah. It's like it's just dismissed as boys being boys.
And that's what makes his character so disturbing, I think. He just doesn't get it, the impact of his actions on others.
Zero empathy.
And unfortunately, he represents a very real danger, that kind of toxic behavior, especially when there's a power imbalance.
It's a reminder that we have to challenge those power structures, hold people accountable.
Create a culture where consent is truly valued.
Okay, but then on the other side, you have Jessica. She goes through something awful too, but her story is so different.
Yeah, her journey is really powerful. It shows how complex trauma can be.
That initial denial,
The fear of speaking out,
the isolation,
but it also shows how resilient people can be.
that strength to come forward, to confront your abuser.
She seeks justice. And Jessica's story, it highlights how important it is to have support,
People who believe you.
who help you on the road to healing.
And speaking of healing, the show really doesn't hold back on the topic of mental health either.
No, it's woven right into the story.
You see characters dealing with depression, anxiety, PTSD. It's all there.
And it's portrayed so honestly. No easy answers, no quick fixes.
And it shows how differently people cope. Some turn inward, some lash out.
Some reach out for help, some suffer in silence.
It reminds us that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to mental health. Everyone's different.
And that we all have a role to play in supporting those who are struggling, being aware of the signs, knowing how to connect them with help.
Creating a world where it's okay to talk about these things.
Yeah.
To not be okay.
Exactly.
You know, it's kind of crazy how much this show resonated with people.
Yeah, even though it's fictional, it sparks so many real conversations about tough stuff.
I think it forced people to look at some uncomfortable truths about ourselves, about society.
And the way they use those cassette tapes to tell Hannah's story, it's brilliant.
It's so personal, right?
We're literally hearing her voice, her pain, her perspective. It's raw.
And it makes it feel so immediate,
Like she's speaking right to you.
pulling you into her world.
And those tapes, they become this catalyst for change, you know?
How so?
Well, they force the other characters to confront what they did, their role in Hannah's tragedy.
Like each tape is a mirror.
Reflecting back their own flaws, their secrets, their regrets.
And it really shows how our actions, even the little ones, can have big consequences.
It all ripples outward.
We've talked a lot about communication, about listening.
But the show also makes you think about the power of stories themselves.
How so?
Well, Hannah's tapes, they're her story, right?
Her truth.
And they have the power to change people just by hearing them.
Makes you realize everyone has a story.
And those stories matter.
They can connect us.
Change us.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Hmm.
what's the one thing you hope listeners take away from our conversation?
Be kind.
Wow. Simple, but
It's powerful, right?
it is.
Kindness can be so many things. A listening ear, a helping hand, a kind word when someone needs it.
And you never know how much those small acts might mean to someone.
Especially someone who's struggling.
So even though 13 Reasons Why deals with some really dark stuff,
Yeah.
ultimately I think it leaves us with this feeling of hope that we can make things better.
Be more mindful, more compassionate, more active in creating a world where everyone feels seen and heard.
Absolutely. Well said. It's been amazing exploring this show with you.
Likewise, it's been a great conversation.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep thinking about these things. Keep talking about mental health. Keep being kind. And keep making a difference out there in the world.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Build Strong Habits.